So, Heather, obviously the big story this week is impeachment, but there are other big stories, some that got overshadowed, frankly, by the impeachment call. Of course, I'm talking about the UN meeting around climate change, and we can talk about the implications of Greta Thunberg and how that all went down. I just wanted to say a couple of words too, just to tie up our conversation about the state of the race in the Democratic Party. We should also say that there is a primary on the Republican side, although I think they've eliminated half of their actual primaries. And Mark Sanford is in Iowa, trying to argue that the major issue facing the country right now is the debt and deficit, which sounds pretty funny on some level to watch him go around saying that. But nevertheless, one of the things that we had cited before was that Joe Biden clearly starting to slip, his support starting to decay. Elizabeth Warren seems to have increasing momentum. And Bernie Sanders seems to be largely static. He's not dropping. He's rising maybe a point or two here or there, all within the statistical margin of error. But one thing that I think we can't really know, and I think it's indicative of the way that Bernie Sanders is running his campaign this year. He was in Illinois talking to the Chicago Teachers Union. He has been out in Detroit for this UAW strike, which I want to talk about in a moment. But he has been in places where you would not anticipate a presidential candidate going when, Iowa is so desperately important. New Hampshire, desperately important. Nevada, South Carolina, California. These are all states that are going to make or break their presidential aspirations. Sanders has been taking a different tact on this. He's been going to protests and to union and labor actions. And it remains to be seen as to whether this is going to benefit his presidential candidacy. But it certainly, I think, is building a movement that we're going to see more of in the future. Right now, the UAW still on strike. Now, negotiations have been intensifying, and I think both sides would like a resolution. It could be any minute. We'll see if it's announced, but this is a big deal because the UAW has lost about 20,000 members out of its at least with General Motors. Out of its, I think 60,000 or 70,000 that it was just about 6 or 7 years ago. GM got a bailout from the U.S. government, and part of that restructuring took a lot of stuff away from workers. This is a big deal because I don't think there is a sustainable push to the left in this country without an empowerment of labor.
Oh, you're absolutely right, and I agree with you. I don't know if this will benefit Sanders in the presidential race. I think that the race sort of will take on a life of its own, depending on what happens in Iowa and New Hampshire, and we don't actually know. And Sanders has a little room here because he's a known quantity. He ran last time. He doesn't have to establish name recognition. I think people know him and are aware at least of what he. Where his place in the Democratic ecosystem is. But what you're absolutely right. What he's doing is is helping to build this movement. And I go back, and you and I talked about this after the last debate. Sanders gave an incredibly articulate vision of what he believes, what he defines as democratic socialism. And he knows exactly what it is that he's about. He has no questions about that. And he's going around, and I think he's sharing this and also speaking directly to younger people. Obviously, the main part of his support is there. And also now bringing that to the labor movement and saying, look, this is what I believe, and this is how I believe that it will benefit you and that you can benefit it. And so I think that there's tremendous value in that. And if regardless of what happens in the presidential race, and we don't know, I don't think he would want to be a vice president. It doesn't seem to me like that's something he would want. So my assumption is he's going all the way, or he will remain a senator and be, the leader of this outside movement if he doesn't make it to the White House. And that's tremendously important. I mean, the Democrats have fallen down on this job over and over and over again. So maybe it takes somebody who isn't a Democrat to actually do this and build a sustainable, or at least lay the groundwork for a sustainable movement, a grassroots movement that can carry this message, which is obviously very appealing and is being reflected in all the other campaigns. It's not just, Bernie has the most clear-cut democratic socialist message, and as you pointed out earlier, probably the most ambitious program. But nonetheless, his program is seen in pieces to some extent or another in all the campaigns, even Joe Biden or Amy Klobuchar. So, that the beginnings of this are happening, and I think, it's quite impressive, really. And especially since we are seeing a lot of labor action. I mean, we've got teachers striking all over the country. You've got the UAW. I mean, this is starting to happen again, and for good reason. I mean, with all the low unemployment numbers and the stock market going crazy, and everything supposedly being so great, workers just have not been benefiting. So, it's understandable and actually necessary for this movement to exert itself right now.
Absolutely right. All right. Well, listen, one of the other things that obviously are in play this week, and we'll take a break in a moment. We'll come back and talk about it. Is the new UN climate report? Things are not good, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm sure we'll have him on probably next week to talk about this, but the American Prospect under David Dayen's the executive editor over there, and they've done an amazing and are launching an amazing sort of series, if you will, on this day one agenda, which outlines 30 major moves that the next president could take, not by executive order, but just simply by executive action. That there are already statutes there that allow for the president to make very, very dramatic moves in areas ranging from breaking up the banks to providing debt relief for students, but also climate change. And this is a week where we saw Donald Trump basically prevent California from maintaining high air quality standards for their cars. I mean, it's pretty stunning, but we will talk more about that when we return. I'm Sam Seder. This is Ring of Fire Radio. I'll be right back with Digby.